Hey, welcome back to my channel. On today's video, I'm going to be reviewing British Airways business class on board the Boeing 787-900 on my recent flight from Tokyo Haneda Airport to London Heathrow Airport in April 2025. I'm going to be reviewing the food and drink, the in-flight amenities, the seat, and of course, the overall in-flight experience. The flight from Haneda to London clocks in at just over 9,500 kilometres and takes 14.5 hours, making it one of the longest routes in the British Airways network. My journey today begins with an Uber to the airport. I was staying in the Conrad Tokyo, a review of which appears at the end of this video. Haneda Airport is very centrally located, and the journey only took me about 25 minutes. Do bear in mind that Tokyo's other airport, Narita, is significantly further away, and the journey would have taken closer to an hour and a half. Our flight departs from Terminal 3, and I arrived just before check-in was open, and the staff were getting ready to man their desks. Again, do bear in mind that British Airways will not allow you to check in more than 3 hours before your flight, so if you get there any earlier than that, you're just going to be waiting. Immigration was a breeze, and took me only a few minutes, and I made my way to a few lounges before my flight. Again, reviews of these lounges are linked at the end of this video. Check it out. Having visited the lounges, I made my way over to the gate, which was gate 147. Despite the board saying that the flight was already boarding, they didn't begin boarding until about 15 minutes after I arrived. However, this did give me a good chance to take some video of a Boeing 787-900 that was going to take us to London. After waiting about 15 minutes, they began boarding, and I made my way down the jet bridge towards the plane. Now, one thing that I, and pretty much every other traveller I've spoken to, dislikes about British Airways business class is the layout. It's in a 2-4-2 configuration, which means that the cabin feels pretty cramped. They really pack the seats in, compared to most other airlines, which do a 1-2-1 configuration in their business class cabin. Thankfully, British Airways also switched to 1-2-1 on their latest product, but I wasn't flying that today. Shortly after taking my seat, the cabin crew came round with pre-flight drinks. I went for an orange juice. Before we even took off, the in-flight entertainment was showing a flight time remaining of 14 hours. This is a very long flight, so settle in. Thankfully, post-COVID, British Airways has returned to paper menus in their business class cabin. A full open bar is offered on this flight, giving you a choice of cocktails, mocktails, spirits, beers, or soft drinks. For food, 2 full meal services are offered. This is expected on a flight of 14 hours though. It would not be reasonable to only serve one. Both meal services will be reviewed later in the video. Hey, if you're enjoying the video so far, please hit subscribe. Moving back to the drinks, various wines are offered here, including French champagne, an English sparkling wine, 3 different white and rosé wines, and 3 different red wines. If you decide to go for a cheese course, a port is also offered. About half hour after boarding, we began our pushback from the gate and taxied to the runway. While we were taxiing, British Airways played their in-flight safety video.
Do I smell the wings at all? I see smoke on the horizon.
Smoking, including e-cigarettes, vaping, and
Taxiing to the runway took a really long time, about 20 minutes, and I was tracking on my flight tracking app that there was actually a queue waiting to take off, which explains the delay. Finally though, we made it to the front of the queue and it was our turn to take off. I'll speed this bit up so as not to bore you. And just like that, we were airborne and on our way to London Heathrow Airport. I used this opportunity to take a look around my seat. Now, the British Airways Club World seat, which is what they call business class, is an odd one. As you can see here, there's actually plenty of legroom, but it's quite a narrow seat owing to the 242 layout. You're also sat next to someone who's flying in the opposite direction as you, and so they have to have this screen divider so that you're not looking at each other the entire flight. Down below, there's a little storage compartment which contains a bottle of water, your headphones, and your in-flight amenity kit. This is just about too small to fit your shoes, so if you want to take them off during the flight, they have to go in the overhead locker. The tray table is folded up into the side of the seat, and so if you want to pull it down, you have two options. You can either pull it down halfway and use it as a drinks tray, or open it fully to have your meal. This is actually quite a nice design. Unfortunately, the in-flight entertainment screen folds out from the seat, and as you can see here, it was a little tricky to get to stick. The downside of this is that you're not able to watch the in-flight entertainment during takeoff or landing. Look, I don't mind having a 20-minute break from screen time, particularly either end of a 14-hour flight, but it would be nice to have the option if I wanted to. Let me know in the comments what you do. Do you watch the in-flight entertainment during takeoff and landing, or do you just look out of the window and admire the view? The in-flight entertainment is controlled with this remote control, which I will be honest does look very dated. You have a headphone socket and mercifully a USB-A style A power socket, although this was super slow to charge anything. One good thing I did like about the seat is that you get two full-size windows to look out of and admire the view during your flight. The in-flight headphones are British Airways' own brand headphones and are noise cancelling and padded. They were actually pretty comfortable and I had no problem wearing them for the 14-hour flight, in contrast to other airlines which can sometimes be a little bit uncomfortable after extended use. The in-flight amenity kit is made by The White Company, which is a British brand established in London. I personally don't care where the products are from, I just want the highest quality, but it's nice to see British Airways supporting a local brand all the same. Inside the amenity kit are the usual eye mask and earplugs, and also provided was a toothbrush, toothpaste, a lip balm, and an eye cream, as well as a sleep mist to help you sleep. I believe this was lavender scented, which I'm not sure why, but it's meant to promote sleep. Now that we'd reached our cruising altitude and the seatbelt signs were turned off, I went to the toilets to take a look around. These are a decent size, there's enough room to move around, and there's also a baby changing table provided if you're flying with an infant. One thing that I really like to see is that it has contactless flushing. I don't want to be touching that flushing button if I'm sharing a flight with several hundred other passengers. The in-flight toiletries were also provided by The White Company. I don't know much about toiletries, but these seemed to be a nice enough brand, and they smelled good. Overall, this toilet was perfectly adequate. Nothing fancy, and they didn't make much effort compared to some other business class airlines, but it was good enough. No real complaints. Having settled back into my seat, the crew came round to take our drinks order. I'll note at this point, they weren't particularly friendly. I'm going to comment on this later in the video, about the overall service. For my drink, I ordered a Diet Coke, which actually came in a very nice glass and was served with lemon and ice. They also gave a salted rosemary snack mix, which was a mixture of nuts and was quite tasty. This was served in its original packet instead of taken out and put into a bowl. First world problem, I'm just noting the facts. For my starter, I had the tuna niçoise salad. The presentation on this was excellent and the taste matched it. Say what you like about British Airways, they've certainly upped the quality of their food recently. This was served with a warm bread roll and a side salad, which I believe was quinoa and edamame. I also got a sparkling water and a top-up on my Diet Coke. Overall, very impressed with this salad. The tuna was fresh, considering it's on a plane, and it tasted good. For my main course, I ordered the beef cheeks. This was okay. I believe the beef was overdone, but it did taste good. Certainly, it tasted better than it looks. I think they could have done a little bit of work on the presentation, but overall, it was a tasty bit of beef. For dessert, I had the rum raisin pudding with a creme anglaise. This was good. Warm, not too sweet, but sweet enough, and tasty. Apologies for my camera shaking around a little bit at this point. We were experiencing some turbulence at the time. One thing I would note is that this is a day flight, which means it's going to be light outside for most of your flight. Having eaten my meal, I settled in to watch a few movies and pass the time. This is an over 14-hour flight, so I had plenty of time to sit back and relax. The in-flight entertainment selection was good, although not so intuitive to use, and it wasn't as extensive as on some other airlines I've flown. One thing that I loved on this flight is that the plane goes from left to right instead of right to left, which means at one point you cross the international date line and effectively time travel a day. I'm a bit of a geek for filming this, I do know, but this is our plane crossing the international date line and jumping back a day in time. It was fun to see, but otherwise uneventful. Now, because we're flying left to right, and because of the way the Earth spins, the sun does set on this flight to give you some nighttime. However, the nighttime you experience is only about 3 hours, and then the sun rises again. It was actually quite cool to have such a short night. A lot of people chose to sleep during this segment, but I decided not to, due to how I planned to adjust to the time difference. 3 hours later, you emerge out the other side of that sunset, and the sun rises on a new morning. We were practically flying over the Arctic at this point, and so ice crystals formed on the outside of the aeroplane window. With about an hour and 45 minutes remaining on our flight, as we were approaching Heathrow Airport, the crew did the second meal service on the flight. I thought this was a little bit late, although it was probably to allow people to sleep if they wanted to. For my starter, I ordered the salmon, which was served with lemon and guacamole. Again, 5 out of 5 stars to British Airways for this. The presentation, the taste, everything about this was top notch. Dessert was served at the same time and was a green tea opera cake. And again, they gave a bread roll. I ordered my usual Diet Coke, having already had a coffee off camera earlier in the flight. For my main course, I had the herb-crusted chicken breast and the potatoes. This was pretty tasty, and I'd say better tasting than the main course on the first meal. The chicken breast managed to retain a lot of its moisture, despite having been on a plane for about 12 hours at this point. And if it was ever a little bit dry, there was plenty of sauce served with it to moisten it up. Having finished my meal, all there was to do now was to sit back in my seat, look out of a window, and wait for our plane to begin its descent into Heathrow Airport. As we began our descent, I shot this amazing footage of the plane skimming over the clouds. It's very easy to forget that you're actually really high up in the sky when you're on an aeroplane, as odd as it is to say. So it was so cool to see the plane skimming over the top. I'll speed up the landing so it's not to bore you. Having landed, we taxied to the gate, which only took about 5 minutes, and we began to deplane. Deplaning was reasonably efficient, and before we knew it, we had gotten off the plane into London Heathrow Airport and making our way towards immigration. So, let me give my concluding thoughts about this flight. I've said it before, and I will say it again. I am not a fan of a 2-4-2 layout. It's too cramped, and it fits too many seats into business class. And as you can see here, when the screen divider is down, you're looking right in the face of your passenger next to you, which is not good unless you know them personally, which I did not on this flight. It kind of leads to a sort of awkward, hello, but let's ignore each other until we can finally put this up. In my opinion, this is one of the worst seats of an international business class airline. Don't get me wrong, it's better than every single economy seat. But compared to the business class products of other airlines, it simply doesn't stack up. One of the highlights of this flight for me was the food and drink. A few years ago, British Airways made a real effort to upgrade the quality of their catering, and it shows. On all of my flights on British Airways in the past few years, the catering has been significantly improved from what it used to be, and is objectively pretty good. It really stacks up compared to other airlines. And now, on to the big negative, which was the service. Service on this flight, from both the Western and the Japanese crew, was bad. Service was not just not friendly, it was actively grumpy for most of the flight. The crew made little to no effort to talk to the passengers, and often things like serving the meal would consist of them just putting it down on the tray in front of you and not even acknowledging you. On top of this, I had to actively request for everything like my drinks to be topped up and for the meal to be cleared at the end of it. Even the way they asked if I wanted the second meal was odd. They came round and said something to the effect of, "Do you want a second meal? You don't have to have it." This is such an odd thing to say because, frankly, I assumed you weren't going to force feed me and that the second meal was always going to be optional. But the way they said it, it was like they didn't want to serve it. Like we were approaching landing and they couldn't really be bothered. I've got to say, this is actually impressive in a weird way on British Airways' part. Japan is known for having excellent service across the board, and I think British Airways managed to hire the only people in the service industry from Japan that give bad service. Honestly, they must be laughing behind their backs when they land as to how they're able to get away with this. Honestly, this level of service would never fly, pun very much intended, on a Japanese airline or any other Asian-based airline like Singapore Airlines or Cathay Pacific. It's a real shame because this is one of British Airways' longest flights. It should be a flagship route for them, and instead, it was really let down by the poor service from the crew. Every time I wanted something, it was like I was inconveniencing them, and they just gave off the impression they did not want to be there, and they did not want to be doing this job. If British Airways priced this product cheaper, like significantly cheaper, than the other airlines flying this route, I could kind of get it, but they don't. Very often, the British Airways flight is the exact same cost, if not more expensive, than what the Asian or Middle Eastern airlines are charging. It's an outdated seat, with admittedly much better food and drink than before, but British Airways, please, 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 inspire your crew to do a better job. It's a real letdown for the airline.